Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host. She's an award-winning broadcaster, a commentator, presenter, and a best-selling author. My Animals and Other Family went straight to #1. Her new book is Walking Home, My Family and Other Rambles. Clare Balding.
These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do.
Hello? And I'll walk all over you. Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for coming out on a Saturday evening and coming to hear authors speak, because Blinkbox Books have sponsored these events, and we started yesterday evening with David Nichols and Graham Norton, who were just fabulous, and some people have come back because that was such a good experience. And this afternoon, Paul Merton and Danny Baker have literally only just left, so I know they had a good time. And the exciting thing is that in a world where we all kind of disappear into our own little worlds and our computers and our phones, this gives you a chance to reconnect with other people who enjoy reading and to hear from authors about how they write what they write, why they write it, and the messages that sometimes are hidden in the text. So we have two fantastic authors tonight, Kate Mosse and Caitlin Moran, and Caitlin's come straight from the Cheltenham Literary Festival to be here, and I'm hugely excited about talking to both of them. But because it's about you connecting with the authors, you'll have seen the boxes out in the foyer, and it's your chance to ask your questions at the very end. So I'm going to start with Kate, then Caitlin's second half, then Kate comes back on, and your questions are then answered by them, and I'm sure some of them will be wonderfully ridiculous. Graham Norton, who, as you'll know, I mean, obviously does all his telework and his radio work, but he also is a renowned agony uncle, and so problem solving is really close to his heart. So last night we had problems from the audience, which was hysterical. His view of whether you should live with somebody or not basically boils down to if they don't have the same decor taste as you, no, don't live with them. Last of the great romantics. But it's also about you having fun and enjoying yourselves, and I really hope you do, and I hope you talk to each other in the interval as well. And from my point of view, obviously, you know, I do a lot of things and present on the radio and the television. But when I was studying English at school and then at university, the one thing I really, really wanted to do was write. And my parents had a guy for dinner when I was in my 20s, and he was a literary agent, and I was banging on about wanting to write a book, and he said, if you haven't done it by the time you're 30, you never will. So I got to 30 and thought, no, I haven't written a book, that means I never will. And then went off the idea because I was really scared because there's so much good stuff out there. And then at 40, I thought, right, now's the moment. Maybe now I could do it. So my first book, which was called My Animals and Other Family, cleverly turning around Gerald Durrell's title, obviously, with the permission of his widow, thank God, was really the story of my feral childhood and me growing up thinking I was a dog and drinking out of the water bowl and sleeping in the dog's bowl. And my first love of my life, who was Frank, who understood me. And it makes perfect sense in my head that Frank was a pony. You might find that weird, I don't. And it was a huge, I mean, gosh, I can't believe how many people have read it and how many people who don't even like horses have enjoyed it. So that was great. And it gives me a completely different connection with people. And it's strange for my family as well, because now people think they know about them, which my father loves. I mean, he's now a literary hero, for God's sake. My mother less keen. But my brother was the butt of most of my jokes. And again, he is in Walking Home, My Family and Other Rambles, which is a story, really. I mean, it's a memoir that brings us right up to date. So it comes right up to this year and the Winter Olympics in Sochi, and why I went and why I thought it was important that I should go to a country that would really rather I didn't exist. But anyway, you will understand why. And it's also about, in a way, slowing down, about the process of getting from A to B, not just getting to B as fast as I possibly can. Because if the first book was about galloping through life and jumping every obstacle in my path, this really is about walking, taking in the landscape, understanding people, listening more to people, not just constantly blabbing on with my own view about everything. But of course, my brother is a star within it. And throughout the book, there is the theme of walking the Wayfarer's Walk, which is the long-distance walk that goes right across the top of our downs at home in Kingsclere. And so I grew up seeing this sign for the Wayfarer's Walk, saying Emsworth in one direction and Inkpen Beacon in the other, and it's a 70-mile walk in total. My brother decided we could do that in 2 days. I tried to point out we couldn't. He said, I've looked at the map, the first bit looks boring, let's drive that. So it doesn't really work like that. But eventually I did persuade him to give me some of his time, and we had a ridiculously long walk, which eventually we come over the downs and back over, and the sun is setting, and we're really up against it. We've walked 19 miles that day. My feet are killing me. I've run out of things to say to my brother, frankly. Having said it would be a bonding process, and that we hadn't spent much time together since we'd been children, he said, don't be ridiculous. We sat next to each other on a plane coming back from America. I said, it doesn't count. You watched the film and then you fell asleep. It's not the same. Anyway, I'll just read you a tiny bit of that section. And I got a hilarious tweet from somebody who got one of the first copies of the book and said, do you realize that the typeface changes and it's a different size in some chapters? Yes, I do realize that. I also realize that some chapters have a footpath sign through it. That's to show you that's the Wayfarers Walk sections, and they go through. So they sort of punctuate the book. And anyway, as we climb over the fence to our side of the hill, I suggest we give thanks to the land for not killing our father when he had a fall up there 8 years ago and broke his neck. Now, my father, if you haven't read the first book and you've got no idea who he is, he trained racehorses, trained a very, very good horse called Mill Reef, who in 1971 won the Derby and the Eclipse and the King George and the Arc de Triomphe, which is tomorrow, by the way, live on Channel 4. I will be there, just in case you've got nothing to do tomorrow afternoon, just check and see that I did get there. Hopefully I will. Anyway, he is action man, brought to life. He doesn't think a lot, he does things, just does things, and wants to do everything himself. So watching cricket or tennis or football or rugby with my father is a very painful experience because he wants to be on the pitch, and he could do it so much better than any of them. Anyway, he still rides regularly. Dad was jumping the tyres he'd built for the drag hunt, which, by the way, is not hunting people in drag. He can't resist popping over a few little jumps, even on an ex-flat horse that can't really lift its feet off the ground, or a spooky hunter that shies at its own shadow. There were rabbit holes all around the tyres, and Sam, the horse he was riding, put his foot into one of the rabbit holes on takeoff and catapulted Dad over the fence headfirst into the ground. He broke his C2, which is right up the top, and it's known as the hangman's bone. In A&E at Basingstoke Hospital. Now, here's a clue. My parents were best friends with the head of A&E at Basingstoke Hospital all through our childhood. That's how often we were there. He said, I suppose I'm lucky not to be paralyzed. The doctor replied, no, you're lucky not to be dead. He was in a brace for 4 months, during which time he swore a lot and behaved like a child, demanding attention, sympathy, and food. Poor Mum. Dad still has a bit of trouble turning to look both ways when he pulls out at a road junction. Do not ever get in a car with my father. Ever. He drives very fast, and now he can't look. And he wouldn't be best placed side on to a tennis match, but he's pretty well recovered, and he still rides out every day. He plays tennis and golf. He plays squash as well. He would even ski if anyone would let him near a mountain. I pause and think about my father lying there in agony, incapable of moving, as his horse farted and trotted off home. Andrew has turned his back on me and is facing the hedge. Are you giving thanks, I say. No, he replies, I'm having a pee. Which is my brother all over. So, of course, my family get, the butt of it again. None of them read it, apart from my 7-year-old nephew, Jono, who's sitting every night now with little headlights on, those little head torches, and he's reading it, bless him. He's 7. There are also stories about the wonderful people that I've walked with for the programme Ramblings on Radio 4, which I've been doing for 15 years, and which has finally taught me that the geography of the UK is not just based on the racecourses. There is a whole county west of Taunton and Newton Abbot and Exeter, whole county called Cornwall, which I'd never been to as a child. And now I've walked there, and I've walked the South West Coastal Path, and I've walked sections of the Pennine Way and the West Highland Way and St Oswald's Way and all these fantastic places in the South Downs Way, and I understand the countryside. And I think also I understand the people in it a little more. And one of my favourite walks was up in Scotland, with a group that in here I call the Whiskey Walkers. They actually call themselves the Monday Walkers, and I was doing a book festival in the Borders on Monday, straight after the Ryder Cup, which, by the way, I rang my father and said, I won the Ryder Cup, because I managed to get commentary on the winning moment on 5 Live, so effectively I did win the Ryder Cup. It wasn't Jamie Donaldson, it was me. And these women came to Wigton, to the book festival there, and they're just so fantastic, and they walk together every Monday, and when they first met, they said, we always started by walking 6 or 7 miles. They'd been meeting on Mondays in a cafe, as lots of friends do, and they decided they were getting a bit fat, so they thought they better start walking. And sometimes they said we would start one walk and then change plans and chase the blue skies, which started to take us further. Now, and this is Anne talking, who's one of the leaders of the group, we're quite adventurous. I can't say any of it has made us any thinner, but it's been great. Annette was the life and soul of the party. She was the naughty one, the one who would talk the rest of the group into drinking shots and start dancing on the table. Her days walking would usually end up with her and Ulla back at her house drinking whiskey and singing along loudly to a 1950s singer I'd never heard of called Freddie Fender. Has anyone heard of Freddie Fender? No. They really haven't. They're mad for him. Anyway, Annette liked metaphorically to throw the map away and take interesting tracks. Her knowledge of the various landmarks would ensure that although we're lost, we know where we are. It made perfect sense to her, if not to me. She also seemed to be a walking distillery. As we've got older, said Annette, we need a few little bottles of malt whiskey in our bags. She wasn't joking. I could hear the rucksacks clinking as they pulled them on the next morning. We'd had a night out the night before, and I'd lost my voice, and I used to do it sort of habitually, but I'd lost my voice, and I'd rung Lucy, who's my producer, who's one of the stars of the book, and I said, I can't talk. I don't think I can do the programme tomorrow. And she said, don't be ridiculous. We booked the tickets. We have to. We're going to Edinburgh. We're going to meet the women. They all know we're coming to stay. You'll be fine. So that night, because we were going to walk a long time the next morning and start quite early, we had dinner with them, which normally is not allowed because she doesn't like me to talk to the people I'm walking with before we start walking, because otherwise they've told all their best stories, and then it always sounds like you've told them before. So no contact, and so I come across as really rude. But this night, we stayed up very late, and we told all our best stories, and I drank my fair share. Anyway, they were surprisingly jolly considering the night before. Maybe they were just more used to heavy drinking than I was. The average age of the group was 60, and they'd all been through the sort of experiences you'd expect from women who have lived and loved. Ulla had recently had breast cancer and a mastectomy. She just did it to get one up on me, said Annette. I mean, I was leading because I'd had a hysterectomy, and you can't join this group unless you've had a sexual organ surgically removed. Does a cartilage count? I asked, because I had my knee cartilage out when I was 17 playing lacrosse. I was sporty once. Not unless you've been having sex with your knee, laughed Annette. Also, you have to be half blind, losing your memory, be having or have had your menopause, have varicose veins and have had them done, and of course be a whiskey drinker. That's the kind of group they were. I loved them, and I wanted to be one of them. And we walked through the Perthshire Hills for about 7 hours, and I'm absolutely knackered. Halfway through, I'm knackered, saying, how far is it, how far is it? And then you reach a point with any walk, I think probably after you've been walking 2 or 3 hours, where your brain just goes into a different space, and it becomes incredibly meditative. And there's a fair bit in here about the mental health benefits of walking as well as the physical benefits. And some of it, I think, is really important. And I think we all are searching for that elusive key to happiness. And in fact, it may be something really simple, and it may be something that's absolutely free, and it may just be walking. So that is the message of the book. It's also about friendship. It's about love. There are stories in there about London 2012, because London 2012 Olympics, Paralympics, I think was the best thing that ever happened on Earth, ever. And for me, obviously, you know, up to that stage, people knew that I knew a lot about horses, and I do. I can talk you through a dressage test better than anybody. But that doesn't always break through, I don't know why. But for the London Olympics, I was put in charge of swimming, and I'd been covering swimming for about 3 years before, which nobody had noticed. But by the time I got to London, everyone's going, how does she know about swimming? Well, because I'd done a bit. But also because I had help from brilliant people, and Mark Foster being number one on the list, the gorgeous Mark Foster. And yes, I get it. Everybody gets it. Even, alpha male heterosexual men get it. He is beautiful. But also, we had a lucky break. And when a 20-year-old South African swimmer who looked like Kermit the Frog beat Michael Phelps in a race that Michael Phelps hadn't been beaten in for 10 years, and we saw this big guy up on the gallery going nuts with a South African flag, we knew we had a story. The trouble was, how do we get him and how do we tell the story? So Mark was sent off by me to go and get him. And Bert had come round to sort of quite near where we were, and I'd made very good friends with man on security. G4S, I love them, don't care what you say, he let him through, it's fine. He may have got the sack, I don't know. But Mark goes off to get Bert, and we don't know whether Bert can speak, whether he can speak English, whether he has a problem swearing, we've no idea. Get Bert, live on air, and the interview happens. And for most people, other than the gold medal winning performances, the moment they remember about London 2012 was him. And that complete joy and the embodiment of what you would do if your child had done what his child had done. And that photo is from the next night. So you get the Bert interview. Unbelievable. The chapter's called Unbelievable. Look at my boy, my beautiful boy. Look at him, don't look at me, I am fat. And then suddenly from nowhere, are we live? It's like, yeah, we're live. And the next day, Mark and I went off to get some dinner with the rest of the team in Westfield, because it's glamorous, and we're in Nando's or something. I love Nando's, no problems there. But he comes across with the flag. Claire, come here. You have made me famous. We have gone viral. And now, 2 years, I met up with him again at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, which were fantastic. And Bert comes along and he's, oh, Claire, my darling, it's so nice to see you. My God, you have lost weight. Thank you, Bert. Yes, I have. And so has he, actually, but I said it more quietly. He's written, well, certainly one book called Unbelievable. He's done 3 adverts, and so has Chad. I think he may be working on his second book, and I think he may now have a TV series. So I'm thrilled that he's thrilled. It made him happy. It made a lot of people who were watching happy, and it kind of changed something for me as well. And I'm sure it's part of the reason that the book was so successful, because it came out straight after the Paralympics finished. And thank you to those who bought it and read it. And I thank you in advance if indeed you're going to read this one, or if you give it to anyone for Christmas. It won't offend a soul. Very good present. Mothers, grandmothers, mothers-in-law, whatever, it doesn't matter. And a child of 7 can read it. But the joy of tonight is it's really not just about me and my newfound career as an author. It's about proper writers. And so I really am excited about both of them tonight. And I think between them, they have made feminism the sexiest word in the English language. And the first of them has sold over 5 million books. That is a staggering amount. Over 5 million books, translated into 42 different languages. She's written novels about death, about deception, desire, and drama. And you may well have read Labyrinth or Sepulchre or Citadel or The Winter Ghosts, and you will be very, very keen to hear about her latest novel, which is called The Taxidermist's Daughter. Also in passing, I will tell you that she was European Woman of Achievement in 2000, because I'm really impressed with that. So ladies and gentlemen, a huge hand, please, for Kate Mosse. Oh, have a seat. Woohoo! See, those are the boots I should have worn to walk out to Nancy Sinatra, not the big heels.
No, and Caitlin's going to get different music, and she thinks she should have the shoes. So we're going to waltz together in a moment. Yeah.
Yes, you got Wuthering Heights because I know that it was an influence on you, not the song, the book.
I thought it was the shrubbery link. The moss and the bush, you know.
Yeah, oh, right, yes.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that.
I've been waiting so long to say that, but it's obviously not very funny.
It is, actually. Location is hugely important, and this book is set in Chichester, which is where you were born, where you went to school, where you now live. And a lot of it is the weather is hugely important. It's like the place and the weather is a whole nother, I mean, it's the characters are really strong, but this is it gives it its atmosphere. Yeah. So is it easy or difficult to write about the place that you live in? Are you going to offend people?
Yes, I was listening to you talking about your book, and this will offend nobody. This will offend a lot of people, in that it's very Gothic, it's properly Gothic. And Gothic fiction is always about, on the one hand, the landscape is about to get you. So it's about the storms, it's about the snow, it's about the ice, it's all of those from the Castle of Otranto, Frankenstein, right up to Daphne du Maurier and the birds and the tide coming in. And on the other hand, there are mad, maniac people who could get you also. So the scene I had in my mind when I started Taxidermist's Daughter was the very last scene, and the sense of, there is my woman, and if she goes that way, she's going to be clobbered by the tides and the floods, and it's Mill on the Floss meets Psycho. And if she goes that way, she's going to be clobbered by other things, spoiler alert, which will also involve, you know, pecking and blades and knives and things.
If you don't like birds, be careful of this book. We've put up terribly nice pictures of Chichester, which obviously make it look like...
That is so inappropriate.
That's how Chichester looks now. It's not how it looks in Kate's book.
These are ridiculous pictures of
I
Chichester.
know.
There are Chichester people in the audience, though. Big shout out for the Chichester people.
Hello to the Chichester people. Hello.
Yeah. But the thing is, of course, the novel is set in 1912. And it's set over 4 days, and it starts almost as if you're just walking, and then you're jogging, and then you're running, and that's what Gothic fiction's about. It's about the darkness, it's the darkness inside and outside. So when I'm writing about the landscape, I'm walking about thinking, okay, I can see this now, but in 1912, what was there? So, of course, some of the trees are there, but as you stand there on the Fishbourne Marshes and the tide is coming in, I'm looking out on that sky and that seascape that I knew when I was this high and this high and this high. What is taking shape before my eyes is little by little a ghost house. So the bricks are coming up and Blackthorn House is taking shape, and then on the other side of the estuary, I'm imagining other things. So you're always just layering an imagined world on the real world. So every day I walk with my dog on the marshes, but what I'm seeing is gothic psychological thriller, you know, the whodunit and whydunit stuff. And of course, then my poor dog's buggered off down a rabbit hole. And then, you know, out he comes, and he's not part of the story because it's about taxidermy, and I love my dog.
Yeah. And also, just in parenthesis, walking, very good for creativity, but hey.
Yes, exactly. There we are.
Exactly. All ties in, all ties in. The time setting, and as you say, this one's 4 days in 1912. Labyrinth mixes medieval France with modern-day France, and obviously the setting for that is Carcassonne, where you've also spent a lot of time and where you have a home. Why and how do you pick the time, the era for your book?
Well, this one, and that's a really good question, thank you. Do you know, bizarrely, I've not been asked that yet in this book. Yes, so you win on so many levels. With this, there were two reasons. As a feminist, obviously very interested in those battles of suffrage that women and men who supported them have at the beginning of the 20th century. And what is really bizarre about 1912, which is when the novel is set, is that in somewhere like Fishbourne, which is the village outside of Chichester, all of those things are not even mentioned in the local newspaper. And the other thing that's really bizarre about that year as well, we're here commemorating the terrible loss and waste of the First World War. We know that those battlefields of blood and mud and mist and carnage and the trees all broken to pieces and the birds not singing, we know this is coming. But in 1912, there is not a whisper of that. And it's very hard to imagine being so unknowing of how the world was about to change. So for me, 1912 was this sense that it is a pivotal year for us, but for those people living then, it was the world as they knew it. And because it's a Gothic thriller, and in Gothic thrillers, you know, the body count matters, you know, it goes up, obviously, as the chapters go on. I liked the idea of that echo, that we knew what was coming, and it mirrored what was going on.
It's really scary to read this, particularly late at night as the last thing you're reading before you go to sleep, which was stupid of me. And it feels dangerous.
Yes, you tweeted about that. You said, oh.
It feels dangerous to read as well. There's something, you've created a real sense of foreboding, but it feels dangerous even now in 2014. Now, part of it is the subject and taxidermy, and just out of interest, I walked with 3 taxidermists in Boston Spa, and the day that Frankel, who's the greatest horse I've ever seen in my lifetime, the day that he won the Juddmonte International at York, I watched it on a TV screen in a taxidermist's house with a stuffed flamingo on one side and an owl on the other. I mean, really, really surreal. But their art is so delicate, and their understanding of the anatomy of animals is incredible. I mean, we were finding feathers on our walk, and they're picking them up and saying to me, "What bird do you think this is?" And I'm like going, "A pigeon." And they're going, "Well, actually, it's a wood pigeon that's 3 years old, and it's from the under." You know, they know exactly where and how and what. I mean, there's a lot of science in there, for want of a better word.
Well, the thing about taxidermy now is a very different sort of beast. No. Also not funny. I was told not to try to be funny, but Caitlin's coming on, so I thought I had to be funny a bit, because when she comes on, she's going to be hilarious. And all I've got is a pair of shoes. What can I say?
They're good, though. They're good shoes.
They are good shoes.
Yes.
They nearly win on that front. The thing about taxidermy is that now it is, in this country, it's an ethical pursuance, if you like. So any bird or animal that is involved in taxidermy is something that has died or been killed. So I do have my own stuffed crow, who's called Connie, after the lead character in this. And she was made for me by a young woman who is an artist in taxidermy, and 3/4 of new taxidermists are women. And this is really interesting, because in the period of time that I'm writing about, even though women still laid out the dead, they were not allowed to be taxidermists. I mean, you know, this is another piece of trivia, but women were not allowed to even give out prayer books in church before the First World War. So it's part of that.
They were not allowed to go to funerals as well, in quite a lot of...
So all of these things that actually, you know, when we're feeling gloomy, we can also go, whoa, actually, a lot better now. But the thing for me about taxidermy was that it is an enormous part of how science became science in the Victorian period. That without a lot of the taxidermy, everything that started to happen in science and surgery would have been very hard to do, because it is about how bodies work, how they fit together. But it's also an incredibly beautiful craft when done properly, not going out and shooting animals and displaying them, but the sense of the dog that has died and is beloved. No photographs, it's part of that, part of the Victorian cult of death. But also it is the great lost working class British craft. And that fascinated me about it as well. So at the turn of the century, the last century, in any town, not just London, but Manchester, Brighton, Glasgow, anywhere you mentioned, there would be 30 or 40 taxidermists on any street. And I just thought that was very interesting, that it was this incredibly powerful, local, of-the-people thing that then became completely wiped out. And after the First World War, all of that went. And so when I was researching for this, I loved the idea of Connie, my hero. And I use the word hero because, for me, the lead character of a novel, the protagonist, is the hero. And that's the person that pushes it forward. And heroine still holds for me a sort of sense of passivity of the person waiting to be rescued, and I'm not awfully keen on that. I want the women to be charging off doing their stories. And so Connie is a craftsperson. She's not allowed to do it, so she's doing it in secret. And then there is a middle-class boy who wants to be an artist but isn't allowed to be, and he's an artist, and he's not allowed to do that either. And what is taxidermy about, in a way? It's about Keats, it's the Grecian urn. It's about that moment of immortality, the moment at which the bird is captured in its beauty, its incredible black and glossy feathers, looking forever as if it is about to take flight, as opposed to led to die at the side of the road, never to be seen again. And so I did want to get in the beauty of the craft of it. I did do some taxidermy. I was taught how to do it.
Really?
I was really bad. My members of my family who are here tonight and friends will know that I am the clumsiest person in the world. So I was given a scalpel. I had disemboweled my crow within about 2 minutes. The smell was appalling. But there was something extraordinary about it, which was, since the first human being picked up a flint, it's exactly the same process. And that also was rather magnificent, because I write stories where we are all linked to the women and the men who have gone before us. And I felt like I was kind of doing that. Will I do it again? Not on your life.
And you mentioned the woman that you met, who was a taxidermist. Was it meeting her, or was it a conversation, or was it something you saw that sparked the idea that said, right, that's going to be my subject?
Growing up in Sussex with those beautiful pictures you had of Chichester.
Lovely Chichester.
Lovely Chichester, nothing like this. There's no serial killers in Chichester, ever. There was a museum near to Chichester in a place called Arundel, and it was this extraordinary museum, Walter Potter's Museum of Curiosities. And in that museum, it had been in Bramber in Sussex, and then it had come into Arundel in the 70s. And wonderfully, given that, I suppose Daphne du Maurier is the closest to, a fellow writer, I suppose, with taxidermist daughter, who ended up in Jamaica Inn. And what he did that was completely different was that he didn't just stuff the animals, as all other Victorian taxidermists did. He created tableaux. And he created the kitten's wedding, with all these kittens in wedding veils and little earrings in, and the squirrels playing cards, and my favorite, which was the guinea pigs croquet match and band. And so there were lots of guinea pigs, going, oh, look at the hoop, and the other ones playing the slide trombone. And of course, this sounds so macabre. I do understand this. And as you know, I'm like you, I'm chirpy. And lots of people have said to me, who would think, when you're sitting chirping away in the way you do, that you were thinking all these things? But I don't think, when I went to that museum, I was obsessed with the museum and pestered my parents every weekend to go. And in the 70s in Sussex, there was nothing to do at all, except go and look at taxidermy. And so I would go to this museum, and I don't think I ever thought that they were animals that had been stuffed. They seem no different to me than the cuddly toys that I make, this thing. And I think what I learned from that museum, and I was listening to you before, and your lovely description of how you wanted to be a writer, and then you thought it wasn't for you, and then when you were 40, you went, yeah, actually, and we welcome you as in our gang. But I think when I looked at those guinea pigs and rabbits and all of those things. What I saw was there are lots of different ways to tell stories. And sometimes you tell it in words, and sometimes you speak it, and sometimes you write a piece of music, or you paint a picture, or you lead by example, or you create a tableau with guinea pigs. And this seemed completely normal to me. So I think all of those years, 35 years, because I'm in my mid-50s now, I've been thinking, one day, that story will come and tap me on the shoulder. And it was Connie who came and tapped me on the shoulder.
And it is a brilliant read. And the interesting thing, I was saying I came to writing and the discipline for writing fairly late. But also, so did you, because you'd worked in publishing first. And then you'd set up the Women's Prize for Fiction, which became the Orange Prize and is now the Bailey's Prize for Fiction.
And Caitlin was a judge last year for the first time.
Working in publishing, and it seems to me walking into Penguin, who published my books, it's a really female-friendly workplace, and there are a lot of women around, and there are a lot of female writers. Do you feel that it's somewhere that is more welcoming than other industries?
Well, it's very interesting. Yes, absolutely, in terms of numbers. But there was a lot in the trade press last year about the fact that almost all the senior people at the top of companies had changed, and it had gone from being a female-led industry to a male-led industry. And there was a lot of discussion about why that might be.
How interesting, because television's gone the other way.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
In publishing, nobody, it's the same thing that every woman and man in this audience will know, that there are things that are about what was allowed. In 1912, women not allowed to do this. In many countries, women not allowed to do that. And equally, men not allowed to do things. And, all of these play in. So sometimes it's just that the next person coming along is a man, and the next one after that will be a woman. So publishing is female-friendly, absolutely. And it's also about people working to a common goal. And although that sounds rather sloppy and idealistic, I think we need more idealism. When I was younger and growing up, we had a sense of the many spoke for the few, and that it was right to think that your job, if you like, was to be idealistic and do things that might change the world for everybody for the better. And then I think there was a period where that went away. It became about individualism and about the idea that if you couldn't do it for yourself, then probably it was because you weren't awfully good at it, whatever the it might be. And in publishing, there is still this sense that hundreds of people, this, will work on a book so that you and I and Caitlin can lift this up and go, we're really proud of this. And a lot of people have made that happen for us. And that idealism in publishing, I really relish. And I think it's a wonderful thing. And I think that actually publishing should be trying to take over the world and just getting a bit more idealism into other areas where there is this sense of everybody working for a common good.
I'm going to talk to Caitlin a lot about creating a new identity for yourself, because the hero of her book is a girl who decides to become someone else. And in some sense, Caitlin did too, in adapting her name, not changing it completely, but adapting it. Did you ever consider changing your name or going for an initial? And I only say this because I was doing something the other day with an author called M.R. Hall, who writes in the female voice, but is a man. So his publishers said, don't write as Matthew, write as M.R. Hall, because then they want to know. And obviously J.K. Rowling, for the same reason, but the opposite side of the same reason, writes as an androgynous author.
No, because I really like my name. Obviously, it became a little bit vexing.
Yes, and it being London Fashion Week, there may be some in here who are confused.
And yes. I think they will be confused, obviously, because I am so very beautiful.
Exactly, and when you walked on, it could have been.
I know, it could have been. And of course, you can imagine, because I have lived on this earth rather longer. I am more tired. I am a lot shorter. And of course, there was suddenly this, everybody thinking it was the first time I'd ever heard this. Must be confusing, you never... And you go, it's not really awfully confusing for me. And also, you get these wonderful things. I write novels with women heroes at the heart of it. I retell lost pieces of women's history. So when you get a television researcher ringing up saying, well, are you prepared to talk about anything? And I go, within reason, obviously. Are you prepared to talk about fur? I was like, fur? This was not for the taxidermist's daughter. So I suppose I will. And then, of course, the killer, will you talk about Pete Doherty? This was in the early days. I can give you a lot of information about Pete Doherty, dear. None of it will be true. So, you know, that was slightly vexing, but by that stage I was sort of out in the world. But no, I wouldn't, because you gave me beautiful walk-on music. You know, I remember reading Wuthering Heights when I was a teenager, and I had been, as I suspect like you, a lot of the books that we studied by women are in the end about finding a husband. Now, I think Jane Austen is obviously wonderful, but really, do we have to have lots of stuff about carriages and pianos? That's quite boring to me, not to other people, clearly. And then suddenly there was Wuthering Heights. And what is Wuthering Heights? It's a ghost story. It's a Gothic novel. It's a novel about nature, about the storm and the calm. It's not a love story. It's a story of revenge and violence. It's a story about how women and men cannot be themselves. And suddenly I thought, thank God, there's a different sort of fiction which is about everything else in a woman's life, not about getting married and having children, which incidentally I have done and I'm extremely happy. But there's a lot of those stories, so I was looking for something else. And so when you know that those extraordinary women, Emily, Charlotte, Anne, the two sisters, Maria and Emily, who died, Branwell, who drank himself to death, the father left alone with all his children dead in that rectory overlooking the graveyard, which is where it is. When you know that they couldn't publish under their names, and then they published their books, Wuthering Heights, obviously Jane Eyre, Tennant and Wildfeld Hall, and the reviews were okay. The minute they were revealed to be women, the comments made about Wuthering Heights were along the lines of things like, if I had a daughter or wife who had written this, I would urge them to kill themselves. Now, for me, the decision to put your name on a book is part of that. So I completely respect anybody else's decision, man or woman, to not want to be visible with their name. But I still feel that I'd like to be me and a writer. Because what does that say? It says to any young person, boy or girl, wherever they live in the world, this could be you. You don't have to be disguised. You could be yourself and be a writer. So I wanted to be visible as myself.
It's interesting because Billie Jean King has a phrase that I think of often, which is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And it's why I go on about better media coverage of women's sport, because I think it's really important.
And it's transformed things, you know.
Yeah.
You know, before this all started, what you were doing there, it's with the Women's Prize, it's with all of these things. There is this idea that nobody minds very much because nobody's saying anything. And now, even just from the Olympics, the fact that people say Olympics and Paralympics, there are discussions, there's the women's football team, they're being reported. It immediately makes a difference because visibility is everything. Everything.
And it makes a huge difference to be able to write the way you do and to the level that you do. You started, though, with non-fiction, and you wrote Becoming a Mother, and then you wrote The House, behind the scenes of the Royal Opera House at Covent Garden. What was the flick of the switch for you to not want to be looking after other people's work and making it look beautiful and making sure people knew it was out there, and to want to do it yourself?
Well, like lots of people, I'd never intended to be a publisher. There's that horrifying moment when you leave university and you think, oh, a job. And you've sort of, you know, lots of things that you love doing, but you've not actually made that decision. And I thought, actually, that, you know, before I went to university, I thought I'd be a musician. And that's how I'd imagine the story going. And then I realized in the nick of time I wasn't good enough to be anything more than an orchestral museum. Orchestral museum, obviously.
There we go. It's another book.
We're still channeling the idea of being older than the other Kate Mosse. You see, sort of, I am a museum piece. So I wasn't, you know, and that was great because it wouldn't have suited me being at the back desk of the second violins, I suspect, because I like a yak. And then at university, it was a joy to read English and to sit there and be able to read just anything you wanted, and to know that there was a tradition. And of course, that's what the Women's Prize tries to do, is add more women into the mix of what the literary tradition is seen as. And then when I came out, I was, you know, in those days, people had secretaries. And I was, you know, did a typing course, and so was sent along as a temporary secretary to a publishing company. And it was jolly nice, as you say. It was a, you know, vibrant place, and people talked to each other, and they were passionate about reading. And I thought, well, that's it, really, because what would I like to do? I'd like to be with books in some way or another. And then found I could do it, and did it, and did it. And then I was offered a big job. And I suddenly had to make that choice, is do you want to be the CEO of a publishing company? Because if you don't, Kate, you need to go now. And that because otherwise you will get used to having the things that go with a proper job. And I was sitting with the man who is still my literary agent, and I was expecting my second child, and I was moaning, and I was saying, God, it's really amazing. When I was pregnant first time around, the book I wanted to read, because I hated being pregnant. I love being a parent. I hated being pregnant. I was one of those people who looked pregnant from behind about 20 minutes after conception. It was like, this housewoman, short, square woman, and was ill all the time, and all this blooming. No. Very ill. And, I can tell you every single litter box, rubbish bin up Oxford Street, I've been sick in every single one of them, I tell you. Hated it. And I said, the book I wanted to read, which was about all the things about feeling invaded and not feeling happy about this, isn't out there. And now I'm pregnant again, and would you know, the book is still not there. And he said to me, why don't you stop moaning and write it? And I didn't, and I said, all right, I will. And then the next day he rang up and said, Virago will offer you a contract to write this book. And it was like, what? So I was propelled into writing and didn't ever think of myself as a writer, wrote books, but I was a reader who wrote books. And then with Labyrinth, went to Carcassonne and got off the train and walked down through the medieval city. And it was quiet in the way that only France can be at 7:01, out of season, when everybody vanishes. And somewhere elsewhere you'd hear this sort of footsteps in the mist. And there was nobody about. And suddenly we got to the old bridge, the Pont Vieux, which goes over the River Aude. And I saw ahead on the hill this extraordinary crown of stone, this medieval fortified citadel. And the rain was there and the big lights were there. And it was a coup de foudre, I just fell in love. And over the years, we were there with the children growing up, and there I could be a writer. At home in Chichester, I was always somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's school friend, somebody's wife, somebody's mum, somebody's mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, all of these things. Writer was very low on the list. In Carcassonne, nobody knew me. And I could be a writer first. And little by little, in the way that you do, because I loved the place so much, I started to read the history, and I discovered this extraordinary story of these heretical Christians, so-called, in the 13th century, who had male and female priests. And this was when all the debate was going on. And my aunt was one of the women who founded the movement for the ordination of women in the UK. And when she was ordained as part of that first group of women, the bishop doing the ordination in Chelmsford Cathedral said, between them, these women have 800 years of service to the church. Why should they not be priests? And so for me, it was discovering this incredible story that was a very important part of European history, Christian history, but women's history that had been completely eradicated. And so it wasn't deciding to write. It was absolutely that moment of looking, like we sit on a stage now, looking to left and right and thinking, I can build that stage set. I can build Carcassonne in the 13th century. I can build a place where that story can be told. And what happens when you're writing a novel is that, and it's certainly happened with Taxidermist's Daughter, you build the landscape, you build 1912, you build the storm, you know that it's going to be a serial killer novel, essentially. You know that your hero is a woman, Connie, who is caring and something has happened in her past, but she doesn't know what it is, and there is a dark secret that will come back. But then when you've built your set, you have to hold your nerve and pray that, or hope that, the characters that are massing in the wings, your actors, your imagined people, will, little by little, as you start to write, step out onto the stage. And if you're lucky, they will stand level with you. And then they will walk past you, and your Connie or your Alais in Labyrinth will turn round, and they will put out their hand, and they will say, you come with me now. You write the story that I'm going to tell. So I was 45 when that happened to me with Labyrinth. And the joy of Taxidermist's Daughter, it's been the same joyous writing experience, where Connie herself stood in an outline like a photograph that's not being developed, and then little by little I saw her. And I haven't had that experience of writing since Labyrinth. And I might never get it again. But hopefully it will happen more, and there will be more stories, and that's how a novel comes to life.
I got a proper shiver. Didn't you? I got a proper shiver when you were saying that, because it's as if it's an out-of-body experience, as if it takes over. And therefore, the questions I was going to ask about the discipline of writing, about how you actually, the hours that you give yourself, are irrelevant, because presumably there are days and days where you can't stop writing. It's not to do with getting up early and making yourself sit at the desk.
That's right. I mean, but it is also true that there is still a wonderful thing about writing, which is that writing is seen as different from any other art form. But the thing about writing is, and any of you here who are writers, you need to know this, that it is about the hard work. So you can have all of those feelings, and you can be driven and passionate, and Taxidermist's Daughter is the fastest novel I've ever written. But I have two sayings, if you will, in my mind about being a writer. One is from the great and wonderful and obviously deceased Samuel Beckett, and it comes from one of his two novels. Try again, fail again, never mind, fail better. And that's what writing is about. It's not, doesn't come, from the stars in that sort of that sense. It's about each sentence following another sentence and just keeping doing it. So you can have all these emotions, but you've got to get them down on paper and share them with the reader. And the other one is Salvador Dali, towards the end of his life. He was asked, and I will not do it in Spanish, you will be delighted to know. He was asked by a young artist, and he was the world's acknowledged greatest living painter. And he was asked why he still went to his studio every day. And he said this: when inspiration arrives, I want it to find me working. And that's what makes a novel, because a novel that works, in my opinion, is a novel that leaves enough white space. But it's a novel where the architecture is intact, so any reader feels they are in safe hands, that she or he does not need to worry that they're going to be let down, that there won't be a proper ending. And for me, the book is finished when you guys have it. So you write it, and you take it, and you put it there, and then you say, okay, it sits between us now. And the reason that I love doing things like this, not just doing it with other writers, which does make a difference, is that you don't quite know the novel you've written until somebody reads it. And they ask you questions about it. And they ask in this about the darkness, but also the thing that's given me most pleasure about this book, people asking about Gothic fiction. It is a very particular genre. The women are almost always victims in Gothic fiction. And people saying, was it deliberate that in this one, the women are not accepting of what happened, and they are taking matters into their own hands? And you go, of course.
And there's some interesting stuff in there about I was going to say the tradition, but there were a lot of there were a lot of asylums in that time, and there were a lot of women in asylums. And I wonder whether in your research you found that some women were really shut away with what they considered to be, or they diagnosed as mental health problems, when in fact it was just women who had really strong opinions and women who had a very strong spirit. And you also touch in here on amnesia. So I assume you have done quite a lot of research into mental health as well.
I can't remember. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I did. I mean, it's not, I very much didn't want, back to our beloved Bronte, my beloved Brontes, obviously that theme in literature, the Mad Woman in the Attic, the first Mrs. Rochester, the great Gothic novel, one of the great Gothic novels of the 20th century, Wide Sargasso Sea, which has the whole sort of voodoo and, very dark sort of sense of what happens to those women who speak out and who don't conform. Absolutely. For me with this, the issue about the mental health hospitals, what was happening at the beginning of the 20th century was very different from what had been happening in the 19th century. And of course, I'm sure most of you will have read the wonderful, wonderful Sarah Waters and her extraordinary series of novels. But obviously, particularly, she has dealt with women and mental health. There is no doubt that if you feel something strongly and you say it, and it's not only women, it's also class. And you are not allowed to say it. The way that you will be silenced is quite often by being deemed as mad. And that was something that I thought was going to be bigger in the book. But in the end, I like to write strong women, not damaged women. So although these women, obviously, things have happened that are not great, shall we say, I don't like the fact that an awful lot of fiction is driven by women who are victims, as opposed to women who are going, you know what, I'm not going to put up with this, which of course is exactly what Caitlin does. And there are many novelists who do it as well. So for me, the amnesia and the sense is much more part of that Gothic tradition, which is what if you write a Gothic novel that turns it on its head? Because all of my fiction, the historical fiction and the Gothic fiction, is old-fashioned storytelling, but taking the traditions of that story and turning it on its head by the women being in charge and driving the story forward, rather than being the ones to whom things happen, because that's quite dull.
You've mentioned it as a theme, not necessarily strongly in this book, but in your earlier work, that ghosts are something that have always fascinated you. And I had, the first time this is going to sound really weird, but I present a program on Radio 2 on Sunday mornings, and therefore come into contact with a lot of very, the leaders of our faiths. And the first time I met the Archbishop of Canterbury, that's why
As you do.
As you do. I was sitting next to him at dinner, and we were both speaking. He was doing grace, and I was speaking after dinner. He, by the way, thought I was Sue Barker, because he asked his wife afterwards, was she the one that got to Wimbledon semi-finals, which his children have never let him forget. Anyway, sitting next to him, and I was talking to him about Lambeth Palace, and I said, is it haunted? And he said, what, with all of us having been there? Of course not. I said, I don't understand, what do you mean? And he then told me a story about when he was a vicar in Liverpool, of the locals would always come to the vicar to get rid of poltergeists.
Yeah,
and that he
absolutely.
did. And that's one of your jobs.
And it extraordinarily still is.
I didn't know that.
It's complete. But it's also the thing that, I mean, we all know this, that when you're, sitting on a stage having a nice, private, intimate chat, or, we're sitting on a terrace in the sun in Chichester or the southwest of France or wherever, chatting away, none of us consciously say, yes, we do believe in ghosts or not. But the thing is, we've all had that experience. When you're walking in, a very ancient, green, deep wood of yew trees, we all know that feeling that just goes down, that finger down your spine, that if you turn round and you're walking at dusk and the light is fading and you can hear the woodland birds at night starting to talk, you feel that if you just turned around a tiny bit faster than it's humanly possible to do, might you see something on the path behind you? And when I'm writing, it's not that I believe in ghosts or I don't believe in ghosts, but I do think that we have very deep memories that connect us with the land and with all of those women and men who have gone before us, and all of the women and men who will go long after we've died. And that sense of continuity of the human spirit and the human heart is what lies at the heart of all of my writing. And so I don't find it hard to imagine that if you love somebody very, very dearly, that you still can kind of hear them. And I also don't find it hard to imagine. My ghost stories, I have a story called The Revenant. And a revenant is a ghost who comes back to take revenge on the person who killed them or did something wrong to them. And obviously, in Taxidermist's Daughter, there is a theme of justice, and justice for particular character and revenge. The idea that if you have done something really terrible, that when you close your eyes at night, that person's face will be there. Now, is that a ghost? Is that your imagination? The great Edgar Allan Poe, the great story, The Telltale Heart. He murders an old man for his money, and he buries the heart under the floorboards, and the police know nothing about it, but he can hear the beating of the heart under the floorboards, and it gets stronger and louder and louder and louder until he shrieks and calls the police in. And so that is that's what lies at the heart of Gothic fiction and ghost fiction. And so am I surprised that somebody might hear a creaking of a house and feel that he needs to get the vicar in, and she will arrive and go, whatever? I get that. I get that. It's not that I believe in a poltergeist, but I get it.
if listening to Kate hasn't made you want to read The Taxidermist's Daughter and every book she's ever written, then you are cold and heartless. It has been fascinating to listen to you, and thank you so much. And you will get your chance to pose your own questions to Kate, because she'll be rejoining us towards the end of the second half of tonight's entertainment, which I hope you
Caitlin
think it
is going to be funny, I promise you.
But you're honestly really, really intriguing. You can feel the energy in a theatre, and everybody just creeping forward and listening closer and closer.
Yes. Come
Thinking,
closer,
"Oh."
children, come closer.
Thank you so much to Kate Mosse, and we'll see you after the interval with Caitlin Moran. Thank you so much.
Please welcome back your host, Clare Balding.
These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do.
One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you. Do, 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 do. Sorry, I just really like it. The weird world of books. So obviously, having done television and radio for most of my life, I didn't know there was such a thing as a book tour. And off you go, and my lovely publishers take me off to various bookshops. Sometimes they have no idea I'm coming, I think, or indeed, if there has been a poster put in the wall, they don't know who I am. So you go to a range of places, and sometimes with the big festivals, it's great, and you get a good audience, or there are various independent bookshops who do great events, and you know, they'll fill Ely Cathedral, which is fabulous until 9 o'clock when the bats come in, and I hate bats. I'm really scared of bats. So then I start screaming and, you know, run out of the cathedral. Not so good. But on my little tour, as it started 3 weeks ago, I did Birmingham, Brighton, great, Leadenhall Market, great, Milton Keynes. And I had driven through some of the roundabouts of Milton Keynes before, but I'd never been to the great Milton Keynes shopping centre, which when it was built was the biggest one in the country and has the biggest pick and mix. It's as big as this stage and uncovered, deeply unhygienic, I think, and has the concrete cows and has a tree that supposedly was protected but in fact is dead. I don't know whether they've noticed. And I go to my driver, who's called Sketch, says on the way there, "Have you ever been to a book signing?" He hasn't done books, really. He does a lot of sport. He knows his sports venues. And he goes, "You ever been to a book signing like when no one's turned up?" Just as we're getting to the car park, as it turns out, at the wrong end of the Milton Keynes shopping centre. So I say, "No, Sketch, I haven't yet." So I walk the 2 miles across Milton Keynes shopping centre to get to the right end, to go to the shop to do the book signing, at which there are maybe 8 people. I don't know. But they've booked security. So Sean, who is my security officer, is going to take very good care of me. And Sean has, he tells me, just completed his close contact security training. So the 2 miles back to where the car is parked, I have Sean surgically attached to my arm. And everybody else who's shopping in Milton Keynes Shopping Centre looking at me going, "Who's the strange woman that's clearly been arrested for shoplifting?" Which, if you've read my first book, wouldn't be a million miles away from the truth. It is extraordinary because some places are hugely welcoming and warm and really others, and I have heard, so we're swapping stories, just quickly, we were swapping stories about other awful book signings. And Kate's got a good one, actually, but the publicist for Penguin, who's called Poppy, who's great, was trying to relax me because the M1 was closed and then the M6 was closed and we were struggling to get from Milton Keynes out of Milton Keynes, which is what I was mainly keen to do. And she said, I heard about this author once who went to Canada, and promoting books in North America is really hard work, and you go to a lot, and even if you're a very, very well-known author, you go to a lot of bookshops with not many people in them, and then you fly across to another one, or you drive across. Anyway, this author's in Canada, and he goes to a village hall to do a talk about his book, and he's good, you know, he's a best-selling author over here. One person turns up, and she's drunk. So she duly falls asleep about 3 minutes into his talk. So he wonders whether to go on or not and decides to start just reading the book out loud, because why not? So he starts reading the book out loud, and she's still asleep. She starts snoring, and he looks up, because this is in Canada, and there's snow on the ground, and it's freezing cold, and the village hall's probably the only place with light and heat, which is why she's gone there. And he looks up to see a moose a moose licking the window. It's just like, yeah, that's worse than Milton Keynes. It was the perfect thing to just relax me. But because I also get driven around a lot now, because that is the only way really I can cope with the workload, which I love, and obviously walking keeps me sane, and being relatively sane keeps me sane. But one of the other drivers, Gino, was taking me back from BT Sport the other night. I do a sports chat show for BT Sport. So we'd just done the show, and he's taking me back home. And I see on my clever map thing that the North Circular's not great. No surprise there. She goes, I'll cut through North London because I know the way to go. And he starts telling me the people that live in that area of North London. And he says, oh, that activist woman, you know the one? And I say, what, Shami Chakrabarti, you know, Liberty? No, not her. The feminist, the activist feminist woman. I said, what, Jermaine Greer? He goes, no, the one with the big hair. I said, oh, Caitlin Moran, yeah, she lives there. And she is the most extraordinary person. She wrote her first novel at the age of 16. She had a column in the Times by the age of 18. She owns Twitter. She basically owns it. As far as I'm concerned, she started it, she owns it. My first ever tweet was to her, not realizing that using bad words just to her would then be seen by everybody, particularly when she retweeted it. And I was being quite rude about A.A. Gill, but hey, he deserved it. So her first novel is written at 16. Then, a couple of years ago, she writes the fantastic feminist tome, How to Be a Woman, which is now required reading in schools. And the really exciting thing is boys are reading it too, so have a very different view of life. And her latest book is a novel. It's called How to Build a Girl. It is out now. It is based on her life, but I'm interested to know whether there are things she could tell in this that actually you can tell in fiction, but maybe you can't when it's meant to be autobiographical. She is, I think, everything that embodies modern girl power, but when I tweeted her to say that we were going to play the Spice Girls as she came on, she objected. And because she's Caitlin Moran and I love her, I listened to her objections. So here she is, ladies and gentlemen, coming on to her choice of music. Hot trail, I love you so. I said we'll just tell you that we couldn't get clearance. She said, don't worry, I've rung Dave. And you know him actually.
I know him a bit, yes. He sent me an email once. An email from David Bowie. Imagine how excited I was.
God. I was a bit in love with David Bowie, weird as that sounds, when I was at school. I love your own description of yourself on the back cover of this. I have read the book, but the back cover's good too. Caitlin lives on Twitter with her husband and 2 children, where she spends her time tweeting either about civil rights issues or that picture of Bruce Springsteen when he was 25 and has his top off. She would like to be remembered as a very sexual humanitarian. Which is perfect and sums you up.
Yes, let's drink to that.
Drink to that,
gin,
darling.
Gin, gin, gin,
Gin, gin. The novel.
First of all, are you going to apologise in advance first for my language, or shall I?
I meant to do that. Sorry. If anyone is offended by bad language, I will not be able to control it at this point. So I apologise in advance if you are offended.
Yes. I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm not doing it to scare or shock. I just literally forget that those are bad words. And also, the word masturbate, it comes up a lot in the
There's
material.
There's a lot of it early on in this.
Well, it starts, it cracks
on. I know. Look,
sorry,
I rode ponies. I didn't need to. Anyway. So I said to her about... I said to you about How to Be a Woman. Like, the first couple of chapters of How to Be a Woman are really bloody, and the first couple of chapters of this are, like, a lot about masturbating. I'm like, can't we just... Why? The middle stuff's really good. But that's the way you roll.
The first conversation I had with you on Twitter after we'd snagged off A.A. Gill together, you were just going, I like the book, but the first couple of chapters I had to skip past those. They weren't so nice. Just kind of like... I was thinking of you as I started this book with a wank.
I'm sure you were.
I was just kind of...
thinking, Clare Balding's going to have to read this. I'm going to make her.
Observe my wank.
What I find particularly fascinating about this is the creation of a whole new character. That Joanna Morgan, who is bright and funny and hugely caring about the world, decides she is not good enough and she has to essentially kill herself to create a new character. And she said, I'm thrilled by the idea of killing myself. It seems like such a gratifyingly noble thing to do. A monster has come to town, me, and there is only one hero who can kill it, me. I'm not actually going to kill myself, of course. For starters, I suspect I may put up a struggle and fight dirty, perhaps biting. And secondly, I don't actually want to die. I don't want there to be a dead body on the bed and it to be the end of everything. I don't want to not live. I just don't want to be me anymore. And so she creates this alter ego called Dolly Wilde, who then runs riot and has a ball. Now, this is something you do understand very clearly.
Hugely. Well, I think it's often the default thing for a teenage girl to be self-loathing, and teenage boys as well, but teenage girls particularly. And that's because the very first thing that happens when you turn from a child into a woman is that, I mean, usually the first thing, I'm going to say pubic hair for the first time, you grow pubic hair. And in our society where it's all about Brazilian waxes, that's not seen as normal now to have pubic hair. So the first thing that happens is you become abnormal. You have a problem, which you then have to remove. You're kind of like, either you have to like go and borrow your dad's razor, you're going to do that, or go and get chemicals to get rid of it. You know, the first thing that happens is you become wrong, and you have a secret that you have to hide. And then the next thing that happens is you start your periods, which again is a shameful and awful thing, which, you know, you have to hide. And it seems weird that kind of women are supposed to be able to cope with menstruation, just kind of like, yeah, to deal with it. I mean, I'm 39, and every time it happens, I'm like, again? Really? This is, again, with this stuff? Why is this happening? And, you know, and if it was happening to boys, if, like, every month they suddenly had a load of gravy dumped in their pants in the middle of a lesson, they would realise how difficult it is to cope with it. It seems absolutely bizarre. So immediately you're dealing with shame, you're dealing with things that you have to use money to cover up, you don't feel normal. And really everything to do with being a woman isn't seen as normal. The book How to Be a Woman, every chapter in that, masturbation, menstruation, abortion, fantasy love affairs, eating disorders, whether you want to have a child, whether you don't want to have a child, are all the things that are unique and singular to women generally. And they're all the things that we have to keep secret. We have to cover all this stuff up. So given that the first thing that happens when you turn from a child into a woman is you don't feel normal, self-loathing is such a common, you know, I would say the default reaction. And that's why when I realized when I was a teenage girl that, you know, if you loathe yourself, make a new self. That's the brilliant breakthrough moment that you have. You know, if I loathe myself, I'll make one. What do I want to be? And so you look around, you know, you realize what your parents taught you isn't enough. And you go, okay, I'm going to make myself now. I'm going to create myself. What am I going to do that with? And you collage it out of popular culture. You find the records and the movies and the heroes and the books and the poetry that you love. And if you look at any teenager's wall, where they just have those full of posters and quotes and things they ripped out and put on the wall, as you collage it on the wall, that's what you're doing in your mind. You're making your new self. But to decide to make that, you know, a conscious act, to just go, yes, today's the day that this, you know, this self that I don't like dies, and I'm going to make myself anew, is the first and most brilliant act of creation that you will have. That's your first step towards adulthood.
And did you do that?
Absolutely, yes. No, it was consciously, at the age of 13, I started writing my first book, because I just realized, because I was taught at home, I didn't go to school, my parents were very poor, we were on welfare, and I thought, as in the book, that I had betrayed my family, and that I'd given some information to someone who was not friendly to our family, that would mean that we'd have our benefits taken away from us. And so I secretly started writing this book, thinking that, you know, when I've written this book, I will get lots of money, and I'll be able to protect my family, I'll be able to, you know, fund them, I'll be able to save the family. And so then when it was 15, I went down to London to have the meeting. It was with the publishers, and I was very overweight. I was a huge round thing, and I was wearing a straw hat because I was working at the time on the presumption that if I made my head look big, then my body would look smaller by way of perspective. And I was so poor that I didn't have a coat. I was wearing a tartan dressing gown that I'd found at a jumble sale. And I had my hand on the door of the meeting room, looking through the little glass window, and I looked inside at all these grown-ups in their power suits who were about to tell me whether I was going to have my book published or not. And I thought, I can't do this meeting. I don't know what to say in there. I don't know how to talk to these people. And the only real genius thought I've ever had in my life, just the tiny little voice in my head just went, well, pretend to be someone who does. Pretend to be someone who does know what to say. And I opened the door and went in and pretended to be Judy Garland in Easter Parade. That was...
Brilliant!
Yes. Just a cheerful, lovely working-class girl. I mean, I may have even tried to sing at the time, but that whole fake it till you make it thing, and that's what I love so much about sort of like, you know, gay culture and drag culture, that whole thing of fake it till you make it, pretend to be the thing you want to be. And there's not really any difference. And after a while, in a really benign way, the mask eats into the face. If you spent 20 years pretending to be confident, you just become confident.
I agree. I totally agree. I don't know anything about sport at all. Everyone thinks I do. It's amazing. And you write it so well, and you say, and then I have what I still, even now, consider to be my single greatest moment of genius. I will just pretend to be someone who does. That's all I have to do, ever. Pretend to be the right person for this weird situation. Fake it till you make it.
Yes. And that is what, and the thing is that that's what everybody's doing as well. I mean, everyone you meet, kind of, however successful and popular they are, if you talk to them, they'll just go, yeah, I'm just waiting for the bit where someone finds me out. Like the grown-ups will find me out. And then you start going, hang on, I'm 39, I am the grown-ups now. I mean, it's on that same presumption that I'm currently trying to work out how I can change the political system in this country, because David Cameron is, 4 years older than me and is a Smiths fan. And, I'm the same age as him and I'm a Smiths fan, but he's ruling the country and I'm not. And I don't think he knows much more than I do. In fact, I'd be prepared to say he knows a bit less. So that's my next plan, is to just go, I'm the grown-ups now. I am the grown-ups.
But you realise how much effect you're having already. So How to Be a Woman, as I said, is now required reading in a lot of schools. This novel will touch a lot of people and they will want to do exactly that. The columns that you've written, the way you are on Twitter, I think you are the direct influence for Emma Watson standing up in front of the UN and giving the brilliant speech that she gave about asking men to be part of feminist culture and saying, we need you. This is about all of us. This is about all of us reaching our potential. This isn't just about women against men.
Well, it has been an amazing, the last couple of years in feminism, I can see the book helped a bit, because the thing that happened with feminism before is that it become the domain of just sort of politics and academia. It become very, very small. And the whole thing about feminism is it's as strong as who's in it. If only 20 people care about feminism, feminism will be tiny and feminism will die. And people didn't know how to... I mean, I was a columnist on The Times. I was 34. And I'd spent 10 years thinking I want to write a book about feminism, but I'm not qualified. I haven't read all of the books. Maybe I would need to go to university and study politics for 10 years before I write a book. And in the end, I was just so frustrated. I was like, I'll just bash it out anyway. Just see how it goes. Just write it. And in everything that I write, I try and make it clear that you could write too. Like, kind of 90% of my energy is put into... I never want to argue. I never want to be negative. I don't even like to argue right or wrong, because anyone can prove something right or something wrong. But if you make the thing that you think is right cool, then that's a massive shortcut. It gets over things. And that's why I believe in culture more than politics and academia in a lot of ways. Although we do need heavy-ass legislation that protects equal pay and equal marriage and stuff. If you go and march for something, a march will last for a day, and it might be in the news that day, but culture marches forever. If you make an amazing film or write an amazing book or make an amazing TV show, people are watching that every day, and the message is being spread faster. It's just a faster dissemination of these brilliant mind germs. And the way that culture can change things is so fast and so uneradicatable. And the big example that I use for that is Russell T Davies, when he wrote Doctor Who, and he wrote the pansexual character of Captain Jack Harkness in that show, who was a brilliant action superhero that everybody loved, and he had him kiss the Doctor on primetime TV, BBC, in a children's programme. And not only did they not get one letter of complaint, but at my kids' school on Monday morning, there were 10-year-old boys in my daughter's playground fighting to play the role of Captain Jack Harkness in a playground. And with the best will in the world, there's no equalities minister in the world, there's no government that can make 10-year-old boys want to play act a bisexual superhero. That's something that culture does, and it does it so brilliantly and joyfully as well. Like that, I think again we also think that kind of, political change and cultural change is something worthy and dry, and just simply means reading lots of academic texts and just having very drony conversations like this and arguing a lot on question time. And it's not. The whole idea originally of revolution and cultural change, but it would be the most fun. You're going to have the most fun because you're creating the future. There's nothing more fabulous than that. And bringing back to the idea of kind of the revolution being a fun thing that everyone can join in on by what you wear, by what you tweet, by how you talk to people, by how you treat people, by the programs that you watch, by the thoughts that you have, by the meetings that you go to. You can affect popular culture. You can change the way that this country is. And that's what I love about Twitter. That's the feminist activism that's happened on Twitter.
I think Twitter's hugely empowering for women, because I think it gives us the connection. We've talked about this before. TV shows will occasionally invite a woman on a panel. And it'll only ever be one woman. And so you're in a green room with men who know each other really well because they see each other all the time, and they're talking about the things that people who see each other all the time talk about, and you're sitting there thinking, should I say something, anything, should I chip in? If you then can make contact with women on a regular basis who are doing the same job that you're doing, slightly different field of it, but we started chatting on Twitter, then suddenly when you meet, you're mates already because you kind of know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing as well. I mean, the world has been... I mean, the thing is that, I don't want to do... And that's why it was really good that Emma Watson made it clear that it's got to be men and women together. Any feminist that says that a man can't be a feminist is just being... When I went on tour, I went on tour and I did a stand-up tour, and I made merchandise and gave all the profits to Refuge, the women's charity, because that's just the kind of thing that you should do when you start earning a lot of money. It's a cool thing to do with your time. And one of the things, we had feminist necklaces and feminist T-shirts, and we had a tea towel that had the 5 rules of feminism on. And rule number 1 of feminism is women are equal to men. Rule number 2 is don't be a dick. And rule number 3 is there is no rule 3. That's all that feminism is. It's just women are equal to men and just don't be a dick. And it's just, and thank you, yes.
Pretty basic.
Thank you. And that's where kind of, you know, if you have any questions about feminism, for instance, you know, can a man be a feminist? If a man is saying, I want to ally with you and help you because we are all on the same planet and we're related to each other, and you say no, then you're being a dick. Similarly, the feminists who say that transgender people cannot be women now, that's impolite. You're being a dick. Like, kind of like, you know, I've never understood this argument about kind of like that trans, you know, formerly men cannot say that they're women now, that's not polite. It's like, you know, they've made an effort to be a woman, you know, they've really put thought and time and money and effort into this, whereas I just fell out of a vagina this way. You know, I've made absolutely no effort at all to be a woman, and it's just simply impolite. And also this weird assumption that somehow they're trying to get an advantage over women. How would that be? You know, women are the losing team. Like, kind of, you're a man and you're joining the losing team.
And unless you're going to throw the javelin, you have no advantage.
Exactly, yes.
No. Sporting reference there, obviously. The other thing that happens when we create these things, we create something that lasts forever, which I find quite scary, because in television and radio, you say something really crap and you can just pretend you didn't say it, or say something different.
No, but whenever you do, I make it in a GIF and I post it on Twitter.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that. But in How to Build a Girl, Dolly or Joanna, she references books all the time, and you grew up surrounded by books and read books voraciously, and Kate was talking earlier about the effect of the Bronte sisters. And she references books and then says the publisher and the year that they were published. I really like that.
Thank you.
It's a really nerdy thing. I love it.
It's totally the nerdy thing, exactly.
Yes.
It's like when boys collect records and they always know what the catalogue number is, but that whole thing, you know, I was very proud to know what all the individual publishers were of all the books that I read. It was just kind of, but that was what I loved about libraries. I was thinking about this recently because I didn't go to school and all my education was just watching classic musicals, and I went to the library every day and read every book in the library. And I've given lots of talks in libraries, and it suddenly occurred to me that if you read books that you buy, it's completely different to if you're a library reader, because if you only read books that you buy, you're only going to buy something you know that you like. You know, you're going to go for the certain bet. You kind of, it's an author you knew before, or you've read the reviews and you know you're going to like it. If you go to the library regularly, you'll take a chance on anything. I mean, you'll read so widely, you'll have a completely different view of the world. You'll have sampled a bit of everything. It's like, why not? Why not just get it out and I'll just read a couple of pages? Why don't I read about an Arctic explorer? I've got an interest in it, but I'll just give it a go because it's not costing me any money. And I was thinking about how that's one of the few things where it's actually a better system when you don't spend money than when you do. And in the society that we've got, in the culture that we've got, that the alternatives that are free are actually better than the ones where you're paying money is a really beautiful thing.
I think also the world of online books creates that opportunity, but equally only for those that have access to online.
Yes.
And libraries can provide that too.
Yes.
Because they can give you the computer. You say in here that when you were growing up in Wolverhampton, boys threw stones at you and shouted "bummer."
Yes. I've managed to work that terrible thing out. We put that in the sitcom. That's kind of we're just
yes, I should tell you, there is a sitcom that you and your sister are writing, based on your childhood.
Early childhood,
so sort of merging of this and How to Be a Woman, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, it does kind of look to the untrained eye as if I am just milking the same material over and over again.
No.
No.
It's clearly improving every time, I think.
I've accused myself of it, because this book is about a fat teenage girl from Wolverhampton who's sort of self-taught and goes off and has a lot of sex. And obviously, I touched on that stuff in How to Be a Woman. The sitcoms
you
about
didn't have a
fat
lot of
teenage
sex in How
girls.
to Be a Woman. You fell in love with Pete.
That's
I mean, that didn't mean you didn't have sex, but I mean, you weren't having sex with lots of different
Has he
people.
been moaning
in your
to you?
real life?
Yes,
no.
no.
Been moaning to me. It's lovely.
But then, so we're turning How to Build
Yes.
a Girl into a film, which is obviously about the same character, and then the sitcom is about a family who live in Wolverhampton and are on welfare, and the oldest one is fat and gobby and opinionated.
Have you been to Northampton?
Northampton, no.
Didn't you say Northampton? Then?
Wolverhampton.
Oh, it is Wolverhampton.
No, it is Wolverhampton.
Good.
Don't worry.
Because otherwise it would be lying.
No, completely bizarre.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
That's fiction, non-fiction.
Yes.
But it's a Woody Allen deal. It's kind of, Woody Allen always writes about neurotic Jews from New York. I will always write about fat-gobby teenage girls because no one else does, and I think you can see the prism of the world through that. And the next book, because this is the first of a trilogy, there's this, How to Build a Girl, then there's How to Be Famous, and then it's going to be How to Change the World, in which she forms a political party and shows how you can...
God, let's get really drunk one night. I can contribute a lot to that.
Do you know what? It's really weird, but there's a character like you in it.
Is there?
Yes, I've got to tell you about this later, but anyway. So,
okay.
But then the next book after that is set in the 3rd century in Orkney, and that is also about a fat, gobby teenage girl. Like, kind of that's... Fat, gobby teenage girls are my deal. That's
love
kind
it.
of...
I love that. Sporty chicks are mine. It's fine. I particularly like, so the kids are throwing stones at her and shouting bummer. At one point, she was columnist, interviewer, and critic of the year. So in your face, bummer boys. Oh, yes. Where are those boys now?
Well, I know one of them's dead and one of them's in jail, so ha ha
Hey.
ha ha ha. I mean, it's horrible to laugh at death, but on the other hand, they really hurt my feelings.
I just very quickly, before we bring Kate back on and we answer some of your questions, I want to touch on a couple of things that came up in How to Be a Woman. Graham Norton was on last night, and he has a chapter in his new book about divas, and he talks about Madonna and Cher and Liza Minnelli and Dolly Parton. Who would your 4 power women be, and how high on that list would Lady Gaga be?
Oh, it's difficult with Gaga because I loved her so, and she just...
It's mainly so I could show that. It's mainly so I could show that photo. We have to talk about Gaga.
I hope you notice how excited Lady Gaga is to be with me. That's what I... That was the night I got so drunk with her that I believed that she was trying to get off with me. And then she started playing me her new song, which was called Hair. And I believed that I had inspired that song. And even though she was singing it to me the first time, because it hadn't been released, she was playing me the pre-release album, and she was singing it to me, and I'd never heard this song before. I started singing it back to her, even though I didn't know the words. That was how much tune I'd had there. Well, it's difficult with Gaga. I just think Gaga just needs to have a holiday, really. I think sort of the last couple of years, she just looks a bit knackered, really, and she just needs to go away. She just sounds like she's just gone to a lot of EDM clubs off her tits and just kind of tried to replicate what she said in clubs rather than sounding original like she did before. I mean, I'm pitching for the job of her manager here.
Obviously.
I know exactly how I would A&R her. Who are my power ladies now? I mean, I've come dressed as Hillary Clinton in about 1986. I'm kind of like,
It's a good look.
I'm rocking the trouser suit. Power ladies, oh my God, this is awful. I can't think of any. I mean,
You
there'd
can
be
think about that. You can think about that. 'Cause
Okay, cool, yes.
I'm going to bring Kate back on. And your conversation with Lady Gaga reminds me of one I talked about last night when I met David Nichols at one of Charlie Condy's parties. And I didn't realise there was no food at these parties and no one turned up till 10:30. So Alice and I were there at 8 drinking. By midnight, when I'm in a corner talking to David Nichols and he's telling me about the struggle for his second book, and I'm going, it's all about structure, you know. I found, when I wrote My Animals and Other Family, I just needed a structure. I think you need a structure, I say to the man who's published One Day, which has the best structure ever, and was like a bestseller the world round, so we all do it. Anyway, let's bring back Kate Mosse, and we will put your questions to her. Say that, I hope she's there.
Oh, she's there. Is she in the bar?
Kate, come on. Because I know we have to finish it. oh, thanks. I thought you were going to kiss me again. I was very excited.
I was kissing you.
Yes.
You're
Okay.
right, gorgeous. Come and
Okay.
sit. Come and join.
Right.
I'm over here.
Is this questions?
Yes, questions,
far.
questions. I'll start with Caitlin while Kate gets seated.
We were gonna
this
dance.
is... What?
I'm miles away.
feel far
Move closer then,
We were
it's
going
fine.
to dance together.
Oh,
Right.
you can
Snuggle
at the
up.
end, you
Oh,
can.
no, I can't move that.
Right,
Bum
while
shaft,
Kate
bum
moves
shaft,
her chair...
bum
No,
shaft, bum shaft, bum shaft, bum shaft.
we can solve this.
There we go.
Well done.
Right, there we go.
That's nice. That's better. You see, the boys
Go.
didn't do that. They
Snugly.
stayed miles away from each other.
We're fine
Right.
now.
And you can do this combined.
Yes.
If you ruled the world, or at least the country, who would hold the 3 most important jobs in your cabinet?
Well, Claire,
I was going to say
Caitlin,
literally.
So here we are. It's really easy.
Kaboom,
That's
yes.
easy. Question for Kate, where did you get your shoes?
Oh, their office. Just office.
Are
Office
they?
on Carnaby Street. Yeah, thank you, whoever did that.
I thought there were 2 tiny cars that you were going to just drive around on. They're just like,
Go wheeling off. Question for both of you. What is the book you keep revisiting and why?
for me, Adrian Mole, I think it's just one of the greatest books of all time ever. Because when I first read it, sorry.
Amazing.
I thought you were channeling fat girls.
And there I
yes.
give away everything that I ripped off in the last 10 years. When I first read it, I was 11, and so Adrian seemed incredibly clever, exotic, and sophisticated to me. It was kind of like, he owns a bicycle. He's got a friend who's pierced his ear. This is incredible. What an exotic life Adrian lives. And then I reread it recently as a 39-year-old mother and realised his mother's an incredible character. She's off at Greenham Common. She's off having an affair. She's incredibly funny. She says one of my favourite things ever. She just goes, Adrian's trying to tell her about a dream he had about Selena Scott. And she goes, Adrian, let me stop you there. There's only one thing more boring than other people's dreams, and that's other people's problems. And that's something that I have repeatedly quoted at many people.
What's the book that you revisit?
Oh, no, we did that earlier.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, we did that.
Wuthering
yeah.
Heights.
Wuthering
basically.
Heights.
Yes. That's a very good
I
literary
have nothing
question,
more
but
to
I'm going
say about that.
Okay, that's fine.
There are
right.
no jokes in that either.
You can both answer this. In the education system, we are told to plan what we write. to the nth degree. When you write, is it just one continuous flow of organic ideas or planned within categories of beginning, middle, and end?
I write a list about everything that's really annoyed me about the last book that I read. Like this book, I read 50 Shades of Grey, and it made me so incredibly angry. Because, quick précis for those who haven't read it, which I imagine is one person in this room. Essentially, a girl agrees to be repeatedly beaten on the clitoris with a hairbrush.
Is that not what you do? No. Sorry.
Oh, God.
In exchange for an iPad and a go in a helicopter. It's just horrible. So after that, I just wrote a list of all things that I didn't want to do, which is why I opened with a 14-year-old girl masturbating, someone who knows their own will, someone who has their own sexuality. So I just wrote a list of things that annoyed me in all the last books that I read and just go, I'm going to address these now. Like a grudge list. Kind of trying to make the world better.
You do
just
have
kind of, what do I
very
need to see?
flexible wrists, though.
Yeah,
I have to
very
notice
good.
that. Whilst
You're
we're on
typing like that,
masturbation,
I'm
I don't
worried.
normally talk about masturbation.
No,
That's not my
you-
sort of fiction.
That's fine.
I kill people.
It wasn't a question about masturbation.
Oh,
though.
it wasn't.
She
Yeah, sorry.
made it into that.
I was not paying attention
but
backstage.
it wasn't. It was a question about
Sorry.
structure.
Oh,
Structure,
that's kind of the same, isn't it?
I think. It was whether you have a beginning, a middle, or end, but we know because we
No,
talked
no.
about. We talked about that. We talked.
I think we
right.
are.
Here's a good one. What motto should my daughter live by? I'll give you one while they think, and I think of this every time I get stick, which I do. I just basically, if I'm getting a hard time, I just think, right, what's the one way to avoid criticism? Don't get out of bed. Do I want to not get out of bed? No.
Oh, but I do
Get
want to
up
stay in
and
bed.
go for a walk. I go for a walk, obviously.
Go for a walk, is that your motto?
No, it's not my motto.
Yeah.
My motto is,
God.
it is now, it is for this book. No, it's if you want to avoid criticism, stay in bed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just get on with it, is my motto.
I
Get
have
on with it.
millions of mottos. I make new ones every year and put them on dog tags around my neck.
Do you? Are they
Yeah.
written
Oh,
on
they're-
there?
Yeah, they're literally on there. This year's
I
are...
haven't got my glasses.
It's all right, I
that's
should read them
good.
for you. This year's are always ride out as if meeting your nemesis.
Always do what?
Always ride out as if meeting your nemesis.
Ride out?
Ride out.
Oh,
So every
God.
time you leave the house, be prepared
Do
that
you
your
want
nemesis.
to leave the house on a pony? Because I can sort that out. if you like.
Please.
You actually want to ride out.
really
I can
like
do
to do that.
Yeah.
But the other one is don't get in the way. I see a lot of people on the internet who kind of like, anytime anybody tries to do something or say something, they'll just kind of go, but that wouldn't work. The kind of default tone of snarkiness on the internet. Just kind of like, just speaking for the sake of it. It's like, don't get in the way. If
Yeah,
people are
yeah.
trying to achieve things, just stand back and let them
Yeah.
achieve something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, I mean, it's the same thing, isn't it? Don't moan, do something.
Yes. Never complain, never explain. That's always a good one.
Be
That's what the
yourself.
Queen goes. That's her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Never complain, never explain, never eat food on a plane or a train. I extend that out to.
Yeah. Except on Iceland Air, where they write really funny things on their menu, like eat your yogurt with a fork. It lasts longer. It's just really, really funny.
Oh,
I
the
think that's
Icelanders.
good advice, actually.
Yeah, order Pringles, because then you can give them as a gift, because they're already in a box. Great. Brummy Girls, where are the Brummy Girls? Woo! Brummy Girls would like to know, this is Caitlin, what is your favourite Brummy Black Country expression? We love the word gamble, a.k.a. forward roll.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, the phrase, to be fair, said in the middle of that sentence, when you go, to be fair, you're about to say something that's very unfair. That's at the start of a massive
rude,
slagger.
presumably.
To be fair,
Yeah.
but I really hate you.
fair.
Yeah, that is, I think that's my favourite one. That covers everything. It warns you you're about to be viciously attacked, probably by a loved one.
Is that right?
Yes, very much
It's not
so.
like that in Chichester.
Isn't
Not
it?
at all, no.
Are there Chichester expressions?
No, Chichester expressions are, nothing like you might do.
What?
Exactly. So that's exactly the point, that in Chichester, if anybody wants to say anything rude, they mumble.
Okay.
So you can't hear what they're saying. So it's, it is the version of to be
tactic.
fair.
Very
But it's like,
passive.
well,
That's brilliant.
it's
Pass
very good.
ag.
And so you're not rude, but actually you've, a dagger to the heart.
That really works.
Oh. This,
I'm mumbling
this
at
is
you now.
this is slightly strange, but I'm assuming it's inspired by partly me talking about animals and partly the taxidermist's daughter. It's for both of you. If you could be any animal, what would you be?
Well, I've obviously established that I'm very fond of guinea pigs.
Yes. You'd be a guinea pig.
I'd
You'd
be
be
a
a
guinea
pussy.
pig.
There we are. Based on what you've already said. Childhood books, so we've done that. Oh, no, right.
are
There
terrible
is the question.
questions.
No.
No, they're good questions. Don't offend our audience. Kate, you did so well. Give her a couple of drinks.
know,
That's
no.
just
You should have
dangerous.
mumbled that if you thought
No,
it.
no,
You should
what I'm thinking is...
Stay in the head.
Yes.
Don't think. Just, or don't say it. There is a question here about overcoming writer's block, and I slightly get the sense neither of you have ever had it, but David Nichols last night talked about a software thing that he downloaded because he had big problems between One Day and us, and basically chucked away about 35,000 words copy, which is why I told him to think about structure. Anyway, he got this software thing called Write or Die, and this is what it did. So you'd set a certain time on it or a certain amount of words, and if you hadn't been writing constantly for 90 minutes, if that was your time, or you hadn't reached your word count of 2,000 words, it would start deleting what you'd written.
Oh my God.
How terrifying is that?
Oh, that made me feel sick to my stomach.
I thought he was going to say it would give you an electric shock, and I thought that's okay.
Yeah.
But deleting what you've written.
That's horrific.
So then he was just writing,
And now
anything
she's
and
got the
everything.
flexible wrist now as well.
Everything.
That's horrible. No, I've never had writer's block. I had writer's block once for 9 hours. I found it quite unpleasant, but I mean...
9 hours?
Yeah.
Why were
Yeah.
you asleep?
It was because I was writing a feeture about, I'd already written a feature about, so I was basically trying to write the same feature twice. But other than that, no, it is writer's diarrhea. I'm quite chatty. It's never been a problem.
And actually, we both wrote columns. Well, you wrote obviously a lot of columns. I started writing sports columns in my little way for Sporting Life, Racing Post, and then a bit in the Observer and the Evening Standard. And you have to file. You have to file your copy. You've got to file on deadline. And if you haven't got anything to write, you better think of it quick.
Yeah, no, but that's the great thing about writing, just kind of like, having a massive deadline.
Yeah.
This is the one thing that will make you, you just sit down. The thing about writing, the writing is easy. It's first of all, the living it first that's painful. You have to go out there and make all those mistakes before you've got anything to write about. And secondly, it's the sitting on a chair. Those are the two bits. The actual writing is easy, but the sitting and the, going out there and screwing up your life for 10
Michael Morpurgo
minutes.
sits on a bed.
Does
He has Michael Morpurgo has a setup. He has a lovely writer's house that he built, and he writes longhand in pencil, and he saw a picture when he was young of Robert Louis Stevenson, I think, and he saw him sitting on a bed, so he sits on a bed with cushions behind him, and he writes like that.
Oh, that sounds nice.
And some people write standing up, and they have...
Yeah, they do look mad.
But
I've seen
that's
those.
if they.
Yeah, no.
But that's if they write longhand, and if you write.
Well,
on
to
a
be fair,
keypad,
I did
you have to sit.
choose this job because it mainly involves sitting down. I was kind of
Right.
like, it's a job that involves no heavy lifting. You never get wet.
Yes.
You're never out in the elements, and you do sit down a lot. But the other key thing to remember as well, that like kind of writing is, I mean, even if you only write a diary or a journal, you just send out tweets or blogs or whatever, it's a really great way of staying sane, because at the point where you realise that life divides into two categories, which is one, amazing things, and secondly, terrible things, which will later make amazing anecdotes. Then suddenly every time anything awful happens in your life, it's like, this is fine, it's a future anecdote. I kind of, I'll just simply live through this experience because it makes a future anecdote. It will make great writing.
The great line from Nora Ephron: "Everything is copy."
Yes.
And it is. if
But
you're
it's
writing.
also that thing, being a writer, that everybody else who's got a job goes to work every day. They don't go, do you know what, I don't feel like it.
Yes,
So I always
that's
think
so
that, if I'm sitting there thinking, this is really, really, to quote you, shit. I
love
Go,
it.
Kate!
I know, I'm trying to join in. I feel,
are.
slightly supernumeried here, and I am trying to join in. But it's that same, you just keep going. You don't think, okay, I can't write a book and I'm not going to do it for the next 8 months. You just go, I'll just keep going and see what comes out the other side.
You do occasionally play on the internet, though. You do that occasionally.
yes.
And I'd reward
Twitter.
myself with packets of Maltesers because they're the lighter way to eat chocolate.
They don't count. They never
No,
have
they
counted.
don't count. They don't count. Alice didn't realise quite how many packets of Maltesers I had out there. I thought you just had one packet, not like a multi-pack. No, a multi-pack. Will you ever write a series of children's books, Kate?
No.
Okay. Will you, Caitlin?
Yes.
Yes.
Very much so, yes.
Good. I will too.
I know, but you see, that's very interesting. And the reason I won't is not, well, one, because I have no skill for that. But secondly, I do think there's this thing about women, and I don't know many men who write novels and are then asked if they're going to write for children.
Right.
And a lot of women are asked that. And it's not that I don't think writing for children is not brilliant, and I don't have a particular skill for it, but I think it's quite interesting that if you write adventure stories, which I do, the question is, what about the children? I don't really want to be
wait
in
till
the
they grow
children's
up?
market.
I've
Yeah.
realised that my motivation is completely incorrect, because the main reason I wanted to write children's novels is because I fancy Aslan from the Narnia books, and I
You
wanted to
fancy
write
Aslan?
a book
Yeah.
about a sexy lion,
Yeah.
and that probably would stop making
Darling,
it suitable for children. So
That is not a children's book.
no,
I'm just
so
saying.
no, I've just realised that now. I know. Yes. I can do a top 10 of talking animals from books that I fancy. Number 1, Aslan. Number 2, the polar bear from Philip Pullman, His Dark Materials.
Yes.
That is,
Yes, that's
that is
cool.
a sexy polar bear. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do fawns count as talking animals? Because Mr. Tumnus would go at number 3. He'd definitely get it. Centaurs are lovely. That's a husband you can ride. That's kind of, who doesn't want that?
Have you written a column about this?
No.
You
Just
have to.
literally thought about it. Just kind of like, you would have sex, and then he could give you a lift to the shops. It would be fantastic.
It'd be great.
It just works so well.
It'd be sensible and caring
I
as
know.
well.
Lovely, lovely centaur
It's
husband.
very good. We haven't even got into, fish and Finding Nemo.
I'm going to make my
give you the
husband
top 10
I'm going to make my
obviously
husband bang 2
stuffed
coconut
animals.
shells together when we get back and make him pretend to be a centaur. Just kind of like, you're a centaur
Alan
now,
Dale,
darling.
do you remember
Yes,
that from Monty
right.
Python?
I hesitate to ask this question. Question for Caitlin.
Oh, go on.
There's lots of masturbating in your books. Wonderful stuff. But does this cause any embarrassment with family and friends when they've read the book?
Yeah, well, you, obviously, first up off the board. Yes, my daughters refused to read my books. I left them in the care of my brother recently for the evening. I came back and he was teaching them poker, which tells you everything you need to know about my family. And the kids were very determined not to lose, like panicking and anxious. And I was like, why? What will happen if you lose? And they said, Uncle Joe said we'd have to read your book. And, and they went, the bad chapters. I went, what are the bad chapters? They went, blood.
Exactly. I'm
So-
with them.
Yeah.
I did like it, by the way, when you let your daughter loose on your Twitter handle the
that
other
was
day. It was
fantastic.
really, really funny.
She's now power crazed. She once let my daughter go on Nancy
Brilliant.
last week, and she just immediately told a terrible story about how when the builder had come round to my house, he'd seen my hairy bum, which is a lie. It's true. And just has become power crazed now. Wants to go back. I took her off the Twitter after an hour, and she went, "My people want me." I was like, "You are
How
going
old
to
is
bed."
she? How old-
She's 11.
11. Well, then she's ready. She's ready, And finally, because we have to finish at 9:30, and I know I've just gone over, what advice do you give for mothers of teenage girls? And then in capitals, help! You can both do this. I can't contribute to this.
Just remind them that 4G Wi-Fi is not a right. It's not a human right. It's like most teenagers, when you go on holiday, standing on the beach, going, "It's dropped to 3 bars." It's kind of like, I suppose. I mean, God, there's a million things that I could say, but the key one is just remind your daughters that they are in the process of building themselves. So give them the tools to do that. Kind of like, just give them more. That was what you were telling me before. But I cannot be what I cannot see. So show them as many different female role models as possible, so they can choose who they're going to copy for a while.
Kate?
And they're not teenage girls or teenage boys. They're just people finding their way. So I think that's the thing, that there's so much dividing into 2 camps now, which wasn't, when I was growing up, it wasn't quite like that. So it's just that thing that they don't always have to be thinking of themselves as girls or boys or whatever. All the things that link us together are much more significant than all the things that divide us. So that's the thing that I think has changed a bit. And just be yourself. Doesn't matter. Just be yourself and be proud
Or
of
and
who
if you
you
don't
are.
like yourself, create
No,
a new
be someone
self.
else. That's what I
Create
said.
a new self.
Be
That's
Joanna
what-
or Dolly.
Yes.
Which
And
obviously-
I would say, look at your body as something that can do things for you, not just what it looks like. It can go out and do things.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah, yeah.
why sport
Yeah.
for girls in schools is really important.
Yes.
Anyway,
Well, yeah, no,
And
no,
the
no,
other
no,
thing...
The 3 pieces of advice I give to all teenage girls, the 3 hobbies you need are this: long country walks, masturbation, and the revolution. With those 3, you will be fine.
And I would add, obviously, serial killing in there.
Yes,
and
obviously.
murder.
The
because
other thing
I
that
think
is
that's
hugely
healthy
important
too.
for teenagers, for children, for adults, for all of us, is to be able to escape into a different world. And when you escape into worlds that are written by brilliant, brilliant writers, then you will find that you will have a jolly good time doing it. I highly recommend How to Build a Girl and The Taxidermist's Daughter. Just don't read this one late at night. I made that mistake. That one, skip
But
the
that
first
one
couple
late
of
at night,
chapters.
by the
It's
sound of
fine,
things.
It's fine. It's fine. But if you, obviously as well, you can read the other one that I wrote too.
Yeah, hold it
Anyway,
up. We'll hold this.
a massive thank you to Kate and to Caitlin for coming here tonight, and to all of you for buying tickets. So thank you so much. Oh, thank you. And we're going to do a quick photo over there. We're going to do a quick photo. Thank you very much. Thank you.